Hey everyone, thanks so much for sticking around for my session. Today I want to talk to you about practicing and advancing with or without someone who can help you. And obviously JamPlay is going to help you with all the content, but then once you watch some of the videos, once you study something and it's time to practice, what do? And that's what we're going to try to cover today. I'll open this up as a call to discussion. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt, and I'll be happy to answer anything you have during this hour. So we're going to talk about how to communicate effectively using this. And if anything, if I want you to get anything out of this session, it's to not think of yourself as a guitar player primarily, because if you do, I think it's going to limit yourself, and it's going to create some walls that you might not be able to pass, because it kind of forces you to think in terms of what can I do with this? What am I supposed to do with this? How do I play this lick? How do I play this position? And although those are good things, if you are stuck in that type of mentality, you're not going to advance, I think, and you're not going to be able to develop as the musician that you are. So that's what we're after today. And I purposely decided not to use any tracks, any backing tracks, because this is kind of a self-discovery session. And if you have your guitar in hand, that's even better. If you are just beginning or you're just thinking about getting a guitar, that's okay too. Hopefully you'll get some ideas out of this session. We need to start with asking ourselves, why do we play music? What is music? Why are we interested in it? And the answer is going to be different for everyone. But I'm just going to assume that you're all thinking like me. It'll be easier. Not that my way is the best way, but it's just going to make this session easy. And I'm just going to assume that the reason we're interested in music, what brought us to music, guitar in this particular case, is the emotional aspect of it. A piece of music touched you at some point emotionally, gave you an emotion, and behind the music there is that power, the power to trigger emotions in people. And we've all seen that. Like, very special events have their own musical theme that is attached to the emotion of the events. The Olympics, for example, that are starting soon, have the Olympic theme, and that triggers emotions. That triggers memories of previous events. That triggers a lot of different emotions. And I'm not saying that a piece of music like this chord, for example, this sound, should always trigger the same emotion in everyone. I don't believe in that. I think the emotion that you attach to that sound or this piece can be different from person to person, and that's okay. But just be aware of that. Always try to remember that. When you target an emotion, the impact is huge, the power is huge, and the responsibility is huge too. You can use that for good, for bad, for a lot of different reasons. But as a musician, before anything, I think the biggest thing that you have is the power to touch someone emotionally. And that's what we're going to try to tap into. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to do that. Technical things can trigger certain emotions. Maybe they're going to target a certain percentage of the population. I don't have the right sound, but if I'm playing something really technical with a lot of sweeping, that's maybe going to trigger emotions in guitar players because they know what's involved. But there's still an emotion that's triggered. Maybe it's excitement, maybe it's annoyment, whatever it is. So techniques can trigger emotions, but in its most basic form, I think what has the most impact on the listener is pitch, And not just any pitch, because if I just play a note by itself, that's just a sound, right? You recognize that it's a guitar, little delay, clean sound, but there's no real emotion in that. A note by itself has no emotion, so it's not the pitch alone, but it's the rapport. I'm using a French word. Hopefully that works in English too. Okay, that sounds smart too. Between a note and another. So if I play that same note, and in the back I play something else, that note is going to become something. It lives now, that note. Just alone, it's nothing. But now, you have an emotion to that. Whether it's sad, happy, excited, hungry. What? Is that an emotion? No. But there's something attached to that. That same note can have multiple emotions tied to it. It can have that one, or maybe it can have this type of emotion. Or maybe this one. Same note, but a lot of different emotions. But there's only one note, and if I played that by itself, it's nothing. So we're always going to try to keep that in mind, and this is something that is going to have to guide, I think, your practice if you want to improve, not technically, but musically, and discover who you are. Just always keep that in mind when you're playing alone. I had this question earlier during the Q&A with the three guys where someone asked me, what do I do if I have 15 minutes to practice? Well, you have that on the top of your list, and instead of seeing yourself as a musician who is learning how to play the instrument, how to control all your muscles individually, that's important. But instead of just focusing on that, see yourself as mad scientists trying to understand this big machine, which is music, and the power that has to trigger emotions. So that's going to be the guideline. All right, with that in mind, that actually can explain a lot of theory elements too, by the way. Like what makes the Dorian mode? If you approach it as the Dorian mode is going to trigger these kinds of emotions, this kind of feel, that's going to help you. I talked a little bit about being like a musical traveler who's exploring different countries earlier. It's that kind of thing. So you're alone on the instrument. You have 15 minutes to practice. No backing track. We don't want to mess with that. We're going to discover who we are musically. We've got to start with something. So if you're a complete beginner, it's just going to start with a note. You just pick a note anywhere and you play that note. And you're just going to start exploring. You play that note as cleanly as you can. And try to attack it in different ways. See all the sounds that you have and take mental note of what that does. Like, what kind of emotion could that be as opposed to this? Well, there's definitely a difference. Same pitch, but there's a different way of playing that pitch. You can vibrate that pitch too, add some vibrato. Play it really softly. Louder. And as you're doing that, I want you to visualize mentally an image, a picture. And we'll start with just a line, just a vertical line. Just imagine a vertical line. And that's where that note lives. We're not talking about music notation. We're just imagining a line. And anytime you hear that note, it's back to that line. So if you just imagine that line, try to picture when that line comes back. I'm going to play something, try to visualize when that line is coming back. It's right there, right? The reason we're doing that is that in a second we're going to put our guitar down and visualize everything from that line. So if you have that line where that note lives, anything that is higher in pitch is going to be placed above that line. That's above, or that's above. That's above. Below that line is anything lower in pitch. That's lower. Lower. So it's the same exercise now. It's a mental visualization technique that we're going to use. I'm going to play another piece, and this time I'm going to spend time on each note, try to imagine where is that line. Is it in the middle, the starting point? Is it higher or lower? And you're going to start to have some kind of shape that is drawing itself. So I'll start on the line. That's the line. Softer is on the line too. Loud is on the line. And try to imagine a movement. So you imagine where that is, right? Going back. So we went higher than the line and back to the line. Lower. So imagine that. What kind of shape would that be? Below the line, higher than the line, and on the line. And that gives you an idea of what the fingers are doing. As you're advancing in your progress on the guitar, you're going to have a better control on your muscles, your tendons, and you're going to know that if I want to have a higher note, I'm going to have to trigger this particular muscle here to go higher than the line. And then lower is going to be a different type of movement. And that comes without even thinking about it. You'll have an idea of what to do, more or less, with your fingers, without having to have the guitar. So that line thing, you're going to keep that in mind. And when you have 15 minutes to practice, the best thing you could do, I think, to advance is to put your guitar down. Step number one, really do it. A lot of, I say that to a lot of students, and they get it, they understand why, but they never really literally put the guitar down. If they don't, they start playing. You can't control it. You're having contact with the strings, with the instrument, even if you're not triggering any notes. Touching the instrument is kind of triggering certain parts of your brain that are triggered when you have your guitar player hat on, and you're going to start thinking in terms of, what am I supposed to do with the instrument, as opposed to what can I do with the instrument. So putting the guitar down is the first step. It's probably the crucial step, the most crucial one. And then go back to that line thing, where on that line you can have a lot of different starting points, but whichever note pitch you choose, ba, that's the line. Or if you start with ba, that's also the line. You've got a reference, a note that is a reference. And then try to have no distractions, obviously no phone, no TV in the back. Just really focused practice and a mental visualization thing where you're imagining something. And if you close your eyes and you just start thinking in the silence, something will come up. Don't worry about trying to be super original or the best composer in the world. It really doesn't matter. The simplest ideas are usually the best, because that's what people are going to remember. So we're going to try that. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to start imagining something. So obviously it's harder with tons of cameras around and pizza that just came in. I will later, thank you. I don't know if it's allowed. Yeah, so just try to imagine something. Okay, it could be super simple, something like this. Ba ba da ba da ba. Very, very simple. The cheesier, the better. That's the pizza speaking. But that's the theme. Ba ba da ba da ba. Then you grab your instrument. Well, actually, I forgot. Before you grab it, you go back to that line. Ba ba da ba da ba. So the first note was on the line. That's going to be our reference. Ba. That's where the note lives. Ba ba. Is it higher or lower? Ba ba ba. Higher. Ba, ba, ba. It's a little bit lower, but is it lower than the line? The line was ba, ba, was the next note. That's still higher. So if we have the line, we got ba, 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 ba. Back to the line, ba, ba. There's nothing below the line. So that kind of gives you an idea of how to map that out on the instrument already. Ba, ba, da, ba, da, bum. Ba, 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 ba. Yep, kind of gives you an idea. Now we grab our instrument, and we don't need to know scales or patterns or anything. We need to have the idea that it was not generated by the knowledge of those things, but generated by our thought, the inner musician. And that's who we want to discover, what that's about, who it is, and what kind of things he has to say. Ba, ba, da, ba, da, ba. Now we try to find that line first. Ba, 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 ba. No, ba, ba, ba. There it is. Ba. Everything's going to be higher than that. So that gives you an idea that higher towards the right side from my perspective. Ba, ba. There it is. Well, actually, I got there right away because of the next step, which I'll tell you in a second. But you might need to fish around a little bit. Ba, 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 ba. Here's the idea. This is not something that I would necessarily have come up with if I just relied on all the scales that I know. If I did just rely on those scales that I had memorized or those patterns, then my fingers are going to take over and not who you are inside. And if your fingers take over, they're always going to go towards the comfort zones, the things that they're used to playing. They're never going to go anywhere else unless you put the guitar down, just like I said, to avoid having that contact, which reminds you, which triggers that part of your brain that says, I have a guitar in my hand, therefore I've got to use it as a guitar player. But if you put it down, it becomes what it always has been, a tool, an instrument. This does not generate any music. I know that some people say that there's a certain number of songs in each guitars. I get that. It's just because the feel of the guitar kind of influences the way that you're playing. But really, it's just a pencil, right? It's like a pencil, and you are the author who's using this as a pencil, writing your story. So that's what we're doing here. So we've got our theme, which is cool. It sounds much better than ba ba da ba da bum, which was kind of lame, kind of simple. But now with the tone of the instrument, it sounds cool and it's memorable in the sense that it's not something crazy like. That would be hard to memorize. It's something from inside, simple, that people are going to relate to. Now that you have that, that's where you're learning how to embed all those ideas that you have inside to imprint them on your fingers using all those muscle movements, the tendons, and all those things. And that's where the work starts. So we're going to ask ourselves, how many ways can I play this? A lot of ways. We also mentioned that in the Q&A. You can play the same note on different frets, different strings. So let's see how many ways we can come up with to play this. Well, and I could use the same string. Or it's another way to do it. And again, you're going to have to fish around a little bit at first. But eventually what happens, if you do this work, that's where the beauty happens, where the magic happens. As you're doing this, searching for the idea inside, grabbing your instrument, doing all this searching, fishing around, what happens subconsciously, without thinking about it, is that your fingers are learning that in order to produce that movement in the line, ba 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 ba, it's going to have to do this particular movement, or this one, or this one, and it triggers the same interval, the same sound, the same distance between two notes. And that happens quicker than you might think if you do put your guitar down. If you don't, it's not going to happen. But if you do that, you're going to discover that the next time you find a new idea, which we'll try now. So you close your eyes, you think about something. Ba-da-ba-da-bum. For example, ba-da-ba-da-bum. Grab your guitar. It was faster to find that idea, to imprint that idea on my fingers, because the more you do that, you're associating sounds with finger movements. It's just like when you're talking. When you start learning a new language, the best way is to immerse yourself in the country you want to master the language. Or let's go back to actually a baby learning how to speak. He's just hearing all those sounds and trying things out. It's just like music. Hearing all these things, that happens when you put your guitar down, listening, hearing, and then you try. And a baby's not going to say for the first time, apple. He's going to try, rah, rah, like his mouth and trying all those sounds until it sounds in the proper way. That's what we're doing. But eventually, he's going to say apple, and you're going to recognize him, and that's what happens here. You hear things in your head and automatically associate them with everything is under control. Your fingers are not just playing what they're quote-unquote supposed to play, which would be something like very lick-based. How many times have you heard that? A lot of times when someone plays that, their fingers are taking over. I'm not saying that it's bad, it's good. We're going to talk about blending and balancing things a little bit in a second and talk about that aspect of playing. But if you're only relying on those licks, you might sound great, but I think you're missing out on the discovery of who you really are and how you really want to express who you are on the instrument. So that's what this is about. So if you have 15 minutes, that exercise done a couple times, 2-3 times, 5 minutes each, it's going to take a long way, because then you're going to start discovering things. I was doing that at a while back, and that's what, at some point, I heard some kind of chord, it's like different notes together, and I tried to fish around for them, and then I found that it was this chord that I use all the time now. This is not a chord that I would necessarily learn in a book, but just by listening, I heard that. And the more you do that exercise, the more complex your ideas are going to be. But eventually, this chord, I know the sound of it, and I started approaching it not from a sound point of view, but from a theory point of view. And what that did is help me understand where I could use that chord in different contexts. By analyzing what kind of notes were played in relation to what they're played, because like we started this session, I said a note by itself doesn't mean anything, but now if it's in relation to something else, it means something. And so analyzing what those notes were allowed me to reuse that in any other musical situation. So that's the approach. It starts from inside. It doesn't start from the instrument. It starts from inside, just listening, reproducing what you sang or what you heard on the instrument, finding different ways of playing it, and then transforming it too. Because once you have the idea that I like to call a word, once you have the word, imagine that word means forest, for example, a forest. Or if you don't like the idea of word, just imagine this sentence. I walked through the forest. Now, how can I say that? There's a lot of different ways to saying that. And you ask yourself, how can I say I'm walking through the forest, but you're saying that super excited? Just ask the question, and when someone is excited, he might talk a little bit faster, so you might play it a little faster. Maybe he's going to take a few shortcuts. I'm walking through the forest. So excited, and some of the words are shorter. So maybe you're gonna reproduce that technically on the instrument by, instead of attacking every note with your pick, maybe you'll do a legato thing, where you're only triggering one note with a pick, and the rest is kind of a quick blurb of sounds. For example, same word or same sentence, but with the different emotion attached to it. And what did that do? By approaching it as a story, it taught you how to use legato better. You worked on your technique. It taught you a new lick. It taught you how to be closer to what you have to say, express musically. It also taught you a little bit about theory. Even if you're not actually putting on paper the theory behind it, you have the very basic theory, which is you've got a line here, bum, 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 bum. You kind of have that direction. That kind of helps your harmony too. It helps you in tons of different ways if you do that like that. That was starting from scratch, complete scratch. You've never touched the instrument, you don't have any knowledge, and you're just putting the guitar down and singing. Another way, if you're a little more advanced and you want to approach it in a different way, is to start with a chord. And so no. Listen. So you're starting with a chord that you know. Let's say you're working on a bar chord, and you finally mastered the bar chord. So you start with your bar chord. Let's do an A minor bar chord here. You play your bar chord, and then you just experiment, this time with the guitar. It's more of a physical thing, where you're lifting a finger. Let's lift the middle finger. Go back and forth between these. Do you like that sound or not? If you don't, then forget it. But if you do, ask yourself, how can I use that? Maybe I can do it a little fast. Yeah, that's cool. And you're starting to write physically, not inside, and then you reproduce that on the guitar, but physically you try different things. Next time, you'll remember that. So if you have a song that uses that shape, let's say we have a... We have that song, okay? We've got an E major, a G, an A, and a B minor. Well, on that B minor, I'm going to try to inject what I discovered in my practice session. And you reuse whatever you discover in a musical context. So it's a matter of starting with a chord. So you started with that A minor, making little discoveries like that. Maybe we lift the pinky. That sounds cool. So now we have this, lifting the ring, lifting the pinky. Maybe we can alternate both. Now what happens if we do the same thing, but we move these two fingers one string below? And back to the first one. Cool. Take note of that. I like that sound. I'm going to try to reuse it. And all those small little discoveries mount to something bigger, become something bigger, and eventually the combination of putting the guitar down, singing, finding those new words that are your words, new sentences that are your sentences, your story, and discovering new things on the guitar. I like that. And you just try to develop your technique using a combination of both. That's where you become who you are, and that's where people can start recognizing that you're the one playing and not someone else. That's the main idea. I don't know if we have questions on this or...
Oh yeah, there's a few questions.
Great. Let's take a few.
Sorry, as I clear my throat.
Sorry, I caught you off guard.
All right. Let's see here. The first question is from Capu1559, and they ask, I found I am more creative when I'm high on grass. What's your take on this?
Well, we are in Colorado, so no, that's personally, I don't like it because it makes me so paranoid that I haven't touched it since I'm 17 and I'm 39, so I can't really speak for it. I don't know. If it works for you, it works for you. It doesn't for me.
And I think that it kind of depends on you as a person. You can talk about albums like Violator from Depeche Mode, which the whole thing was written while the whole band was on LSD. Like great album or whatever. But for every example you have of an album that is written in that way, you probably have an example of an album that isn't. So if it works for you, it works for you.
Right. No, that's good. Yeah, that's a good point.
Next question. This is from Andy Anderson. How much background knowledge of the fretboard do you recommend before the put the guitar down exercise?
None, really. Zero. You don't need any fretboard knowledge. You might think that you need some because I was saying something and then reproduced it instantly, but it starts from nowhere. And so, yeah, you don't need any fretboard knowledge at all. Just use that visualization thing, though, where you're thinking about the placement of the note in reference to the line. Because we're just considering that this is new and there's still a lot of things to discover on the instrument, I think. And there's your unique way of discovering something new also. And a discovery means trial and error. And so actually, I will say that sometimes if you don't have any fretboard knowledge or you break that knowledge that you have by maybe tuning the guitar differently, that's going to reconnect you with the research aspect of things, which really does something good for your creativity. So you don't need any knowledge.
All right, we'll get to the next question here. This one's from Steve Schmidt. If the sounds in my head keep changing, would you suggest I record them and then try to figure it out?
I'd say maybe you need to just simplify the ideas in your head when you're doing this kind of work. Just do a 3-note thing and sing it multiple times before you grab your instrument. And just really force yourself to stick to those 3 notes, or even 2, that's okay. Having a lot of ideas is great, and at some point, record them, but that's a different type of work, because here we're trying to connect the idea from inside to all the physical aspect. And so the shorter the idea, the better to do that, because you can focus on just one particular type of sound or one movement and connecting that little piece to your fingers. Eventually, as you go, the pieces will become bigger and bigger, but it's not about remembering long, extended musical themes. It's just learning how to embed all those ideas into your fingers.
All right. The next question is from Russ Snell. How do you get through the technical aspects of guitar playing so you can play what your emotions want to portray?
I think the key element is to focus on just one technique at a time. And when I say one technique, it can mean, like if someone thinks of technique, they might think of alternate picking as a technique, for example, where you're alternate picking every string, down, up, down, up, down, up, and triggering the notes. But even that alternate picking by itself is made of a lot of small, tiny micro techniques, like just the right hand. Just focus on that, and then just add the left hand, where you're really synchronizing everything together. Just do it on one string. 10 minutes, or a full practice session, or a full week to master that, and then just master the changing the strings. So really be analytical of whatever you're doing when you're approaching a technique, and remembering that a technique oftentimes is a result of many different micro techniques combined at the same time. But the most important thing is to be analytical of what you're playing. Like, analyze everything. Are my hands really synchronized as I'm triggering a note with my right? Am I putting pressure with the left at the same time? And should I do that? Maybe I should put pressure before. But if you put it before, that might mess up your rhythm feel if you're playing something. Whereas if you really synchronize both, put pressure as you're triggering, that's going to help your rhythm balance. That kind of thing. So really analyze everything. That's the biggest thing. Watch your fingers, what they're doing. Ask yourselves, should I do this? Should I not? That's the best advice that I have for technique.
All right. Well, if that's the best advice you have for technique, let's move on to the next question. This is from Peter Aronson. After practicing for a while, my left hand gets stiff. Any hand exercises for flexibility?
Yeah. So definitely take breaks. If it starts to hurt, if you feel like it's getting stiff, take a break. That's okay. Drink tons of water. It can be seen as a sport. It's demanding physically, depending on what you're doing. So have a healthy lifestyle if you can. That really does help clear your mind and then your muscles and all that. But as far as exercises go, I would say doing simple things like, my favorite exercise uses all four fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I start on the lower area of the neck because the frets are a little wider. And then I do this in 4 different directions. So if you're looking at your guitar, the 4 directions are ascending, descending, so that's 2, but there's a pair of both. So the ascending part can be from left to right. So left to right ascending, left to right descending. Right to left ascending. And right to left descending. And as you're doing this, don't worry about speed, but really synchronization. You're triggering a note, and you put pressure at the same time with your left hand. Pressure, 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 pressure. So it's based on that, on those 4 directions, and then you use all possible fingers. Two notes per string, so index, ring, ascending, left to right. Index, ring, left to right, descending. And then ring index, that's right to left ascending. And descending. Then you do the same with index ring. And then index pinky. It really works all the tendons and muscles. Good stretching exercise. Once you did all the combinations with the index, you'll do the same with the ring. So ring, middle ring. And then ring pinky. And then once you did the 4 directions, you'll do a ring pinky, like that. That really helps, and massaging your hands, like you're taking the palm where you're having the 4 fingers of your right hand on the back of your left hand, and then your thumb is doing a circular motion like this in the middle, and then you do the same from the base of your fingers in a circular motion all the way to the fingertips. And a combination of this exercise and the massages and drinking water and taking breaks, I think it's going to help you last a little bit longer when you're playing. I'll plug my October session really quick because we're going to talk about that. In October, I have a live session for JamPlay members every week, and we're going to talk specifically about building stamina and avoiding those problems. So if you're around in October, I'd love to see you for that.
All right, let's get to the next question here. This is from T. Buzewski, I think. How important is it to memorize the fretboard, or is it just learning the patterns for scales okay?
I think it depends what you want to do. And it depends what you mean by memorizing the fretboard. Memorizing the patterns, is important, but maybe not for the reason you think. It's important because as you're memorizing these shapes, you're associating with the shapes and the way that you play the shapes and the muscles involved. You're associating with that sounds. And that's the most important thing. Because just like we did earlier, the sound comes from inside, the music comes from inside, and then instead of just coming out through your mouth, like a singer would, it comes out through your fingers, and it's learning how to put into those muscle triggers the sounds that you have in your head. And learning the positions does that. If you're hearing the sound that is triggered, as many times as you do that, your ear is going to start recognizing some sounds. And so, yes, it's important. As far as memorizing the fretboard, as far as notes go, it depends. If I play a note randomly like this, and you ask me what note that is, I've got to look and think about it. It's a B flat, but I've got to think about it. Or, a B sharp, or no, a C. See? It's not that important. No, it depends what you're going to do. If you want to work for JamPlay, it's not. No, it is. I'm fired. It depends.
Right in the middle here. Okay, you can leave now. All right, let's get to the next question here. This is from Mike Hardy. Yes, what is the best way to get out of being stuck in a playing rut?
Yeah, so that exercise that I showed you, where you put your guitar down, is probably the best that I found. But you really have to put your guitar down, or you force yourself to have your guitar down. You go on a walk, and my best ideas have been on walks where I just think about it and compose in my head. And also taking an extended break, like a week off where you don't touch the guitar. You might be scared that you're going to lose it, lose the ability to play and all that, but it really does wonders for your playing to take a break. Because even if you're not playing, if you're not actively thinking about it, you're still subconsciously thinking about things and making connections in your head for some of the problems you might have in your playing. You can experiment with that. Before you go to bed, think about a problem that's bothering you, like a small problem, like you've got a new piece of furniture and you don't know where to fit it in the house. Just ask yourself the question before you go to bed, and think about it a little bit, and then you sleep on it, and often in the morning you have the solution to that problem. That's what happens when you take a break. Take a week off or 5 days or whatever it is. You come back to it and you might find that, oh, I need to practice a little bit to get up to speed. It's not that long. But some of the things you were struggling with might surprise you because you're not struggling with them anymore. So take a break or break that connection that you have with the instrument all the time by putting it down and starting to imagine things and reproducing them.
Okay, let's get to the next one. This one comes in from Sandy. They ask, can you explain how to play a note but rake the rest of the strings without having those strings ringing out?
Yeah, so it has to do with muting the strings. And in order to have a pitch, you have to have pressure on the left hand on a string. If you play an open string, you still have to have pressure, except that that pressure is automatically done by the nut of the guitar. So if you want to rake, let's not even talk about a rake leading into a proper note. A rake by itself happens by not putting that pressure. And so that means that you're going to cover all the strings, but without any pressure. And if you do that, you get that sound, the sound of a rake. Now, usually the left finger that you're using, regardless of the finger, is not enough because you're still getting a little bit of, sometimes you might have some harmonics coming out. So it's not enough, so we're going to use the palm of our right hand. The side here is going to rest on the strings, covering those strings. Your left hand is also going to just rest on the neck. We'll talk about the landing note in a second. And your pick is held between the thumb and the index in this case. And if you just practice, it sounds a lot more muted than just the left hand. Now, we want to lead into a note, and for that, let's say that we're aiming for the 3rd string, 5th fret. That note. Well, in that case, because you want to trigger that note and put pressure on that 3rd string, 5th fret really quick, you might not have time to do the left finger leading into it. So your left hand is going to be just on that note that you want to trigger, and the whole muting part is just with the palm of your right hand, just resting on the strings. And if I do it slow motion, you lift everything just last second or at the same time. Now, there's a danger of having the notes that were covered with the palm of your right hand ring out. And that's where the thumb of my left hand is kind of resting here. It's resting here, muting those strings too. Start it slowly. And it's the kind of technique, the faster you go, the easier it is if you master those movements. Because if you're really slow, then you might hear that. But if I'm fast, you won't hear it. You have time to stop it in its track. That's the basics of it. I hope that helps. And if you have a distorted sound, it's going to help even more. Distortion pedal. It'll be useful.
All right. Next question here. It is 5:56 here our time, so we're coming to the end of this hour chunk here. You guys have absolutely inundated us with questions. We're going to try and get to as many as we can, but we probably won't be able to get to all of these, you guys. We do apologize.
We got to do the giveaway.
Yeah, we got to do a giveaway here coming up. So anyway, let's get to this one. This is from Laroa Harrison. When you get your theme and find it on the guitar, how do you create chords to go around it?
So there are two approaches, and it depends on your level of knowledge of theory. But in essence, a theme or a lick or an idea and a chord, they're attached, and they're part of the same thing. They're part of the same musical alphabet. So if you have a 7-letter alphabet, musical alphabet, the 7-note scale, you're going to find the same notes in the same scale and the same chord. So the first step, let's go back to that idea we had. See, I still remember, which means that it was a good idea. It was generated by me not playing, and those are the most memorable ideas. But I've got that. So in essence, any 2 note together is going to be a chord. So I could pick any 2 notes. They're going to be on different strings in this case. So it could be these 3 notes on the 2nd string. Let's pick this one. And these 2 notes on the 3rd string. So any of these 2 notes, let's pick this one. That would be a chord that works. Or that one. A lot of different options. And what I would do is start with that, and then if that's not enough, if that's not really a chord that you know, take a blank sheet of paper with a virtual neck diagram, and you put dots anytime you have one of the notes of your theme. Put a dot here, 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 here. And that'll start drawing a scale shape. And if you're a little more advanced, you're going to be able to tie that scale shape with another full scale, a more complete scale. Once you have that, anytime you have one of these notes, you put a dot on your fretboard. And same with all the other notes of your lick. You're going to have a big fretboard, and from that big fretboard you can extract chords. They don't need to be conventional chords. Any 2, 3, 4 notes from that shape is going to be a chord that is a valid option. You don't even need to know the name of that chord. So if I did that, that would be valid. So I went a little fast here, but taking your fretboard, putting dots are going to be a visual representation of where all the possible chords lie. And you can make up your chords. Just pick 2, 3, 4 notes of the same scale. It's going to be a valid option.
All right, next one here. This is from G. Schildmeyer. Can you put the same amount of nuance into a phrase with an acoustic guitar?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to have to do with the pick, the attack of the pick, the way that you put pressure on your string. So yeah, absolutely. It's all, you're getting tons of options too. Acoustic, electric. Yep.